Today we're going to go over the answers for the Chapter 2 study guide. First, let's look at number 1, which is looking for a true statement about catalysts. Catalysts lower activation energy, which makes the answer D. Something that's not a function of proteins would be letter A, where we store and transmit genetic information. Proteins don't do that. 3 is C, a chemical reaction. 4 is B, activation energy. 5 is identifying reactants, which is B, carbon dioxide and water. 6 is D, which is what makes up water. And 7 is B, proteins are polymers formed from amino acids. Number 8 wants to know the kinds of atoms that are bonded to carbon. And here you'll see a hydrogen, an oxygen, and a nitrogen, and that makes the answer C. Number 9 wants to know a substance with a pH of 6. So that means that it's going to be an acid. Solutions that have more hydroxide than hydrogens are bases. In chemical reactions, atoms are rearranged. And when hydrogen and oxygen combine to form water, water is the product of that chemical reaction. Number 13 says, which of the following diagrams correctly shows the reaction pathway of a reaction that absorbs energy? The correct answer is B, and any reaction with energy absorbed means that the products are more energetic than the reactants. For the fill in the blank, another name for a biological catalyst is an enzyme. A solution with an equal number of hydrogen and hydroxide ions has a pH of 7, it's neutral. A solution with a pH of 12 is a base, and a molecule that has a partial positive charge on one side and partial negative charge on the other side is called a polar molecule. An example would be water. And all organic molecules contain carbon, so that is considered, we are considered carbon-based life forms. For the next matching section, you should have found that examples of carbohydrates include glucose, glycogen, and sugar. Lipids include nonpolar substances that dissolve in oil, such as fats. Nucleic acids are made of nucleotides, and examples include DNA and RNA. And proteins are made of amino acids and can act as structural molecules in your body or act as enzymes. For the completion section, 2 molecules that are nucleic acids include DNA and RNA. Any substance that speeds up chemical reactions is called a catalyst. Remember, catalysts are inorganic sometimes. A protein that speeds up chemical reactions is an enzyme, sometimes also called an organic catalyst. The molecule that people use and animals use to store sugars as a polysaccharide is glycogen. And carbohydrates can be found in 3 forms: monosaccharides, disaccharides, and polysaccharides. Lipids include cholesterol, fats, waxes, and oils. And the molecule that is not a monomer is protein. So remember, monomers are single molecules, polymers are many molecules together. And then you'll notice also that there is, for question number 30, a diagram that has a whole bunch of little bonds between these water molecules. Those bonds that are shown by the dotted lines are very weak attractions between negatively charged oxygen molecules and positively charged hydrogen molecules. And those molecules are called hydrogen bonds. Remember, hydrogen bonds are the type of bond that form in liquid water and then hold water together enough to create something called surface tension. It's also described as the property cohesion. When we refer to the picture on the previous page, we just talked about this. The property of water molecules sticking to other water molecules is indeed letter B, cohesion. And then number 32 is looking at a graph that shows 2 different activation energy lines. So line A and line B. Line A requires more activation energy than line B, which means that line B is showing the catalyzed reaction because the amount of energy needed to get the reaction started is significantly less than the activation energy needed for line A. For question number 33, we're looking for the reactants in a chemical reaction. Remember, the reactants are always on the left side of the arrow or at the start of the chemical reaction. So in this case, the reactants are letter A. When we're looking for the products are what you have at the end of the reaction. Usually they're on the right side of a reaction arrow. And in this diagram, the products are located at letter B. Number 35 says which graph shows an endergonic reaction. Remember, endergonic reactions absorb energy, and so number 35 is graph number 2 because the products have a higher energy value than the reactants. And then number 36 asks which graph shows a reaction in which energy is released. That makes this an exergonic reaction, and the exergonic reaction is shown in graph A. And then the last question says which letter represents the activation energy for either reaction, since the graphs are labeled the same, and the activation energy is shown with letter C. So here you can see the activation energy for graph 2 and the activation energy for graph 1. On this page, we are going to be identifying the shape of some different organic molecules. So we're going to start with a saturated lipid. Saturated lipids have no double bonds. So in this particular instance, the saturated lipid is represented by letter E. If you have an unsaturated lipid, also called an unsaturated fat, you'll notice that there is, in fact, double bonds between at least 2 of the carbons. And that means that 39 is D. Number 40 is looking for a nitrogen base. And so there is a molecule that contains lots of nitrogens, but not any other molecular parts. And so here you can see we've got a bunch of nitrogens in this molecule. Letter A is our nitrogen base. Number 41 is looking for a nucleotide. A nucleotide contains a nitrogen base, but it also contains a phosphate molecule and a sugar. So letter B is our nucleotide. And then the last molecule is looking for a cholesterol. You'll notice that there's this thing with a 4-ring structure. Those are what cholesterol molecules look like. So number 42 is C. We've got one more group of molecules to identify. So the first one we're looking for is a monosaccharide. Remember, that's a single sugar. So the single sugar is letter D. Then we need to look at number 44 for a disaccharide. Remember, the prefix di means 2, and there is a sugar here with 2 sugars attached to each other, and so that's letter C, the disaccharide. Number 45 is looking for a polysaccharide. Poly means many, and you'll notice that letter E has many sugars stuck together, so that's our polysaccharide. Number 45 is looking for an amino acid. Amino acids always have this amine group and this acid group, and then they have a place for a unique R group to go. So that's what an amino acid looks like. So that's letter A. And if you have many amino acids stuck together, then you get a protein. So here's a chain of amino acids, and that's letter B.